Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of RecruitMilitary Live, a continuing series of live broadcasts covering all things military transition, veteran employment, mil-spouse employment, and much, much more. My name is Lucas Connolly, retired U.S. Army officer and former TAP program manager, here to share with you the ins and outs of making the move to the civilian world of employment. If you're in search of meaningful employment after a career in the military, well, you're in the right place. Please visit rmvets.com/live to learn more. Okay, folks, let's roll into today's show. You're thinking about leaving the military? You have concerns about being financially secure as you transition to the next phase of your life? Well, you're watching the right show, so don't touch that mouse. Today's guest is a certified financial advisor who works very closely with active duty service members, transitioning service members, retirees, veterans, and mil-spouses alike to help them plan for their financial future. He wants you to be confident about your finances by implementing a strategy for your investments that won't leave you feeling anxious. He takes his passion to the next level by hosting a monthly forum called Transition 30. He brings together subject matter experts on that forum to discuss military transitions, employment, VA benefits, insurance, retirement planning, and a host of other topics, all aimed at helping service members and veterans make the very best of their transition from the military service to civilian life. At the end of today's show, he's going to tell us how you can reach out to him for a free 30-minute financial consultation. And I'll tell you, we do like free. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the show today, Mr. Todd Nelson. Todd.
Hey, Lucas. You know what? I appreciate the intro and the Transition 30. One of the experts next week is going to be you. So,
wow.
You know,
what was it?
What can you say, right?
What was it that Groucho Marx said? I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member.
Understood, but you know it's a great venue, and everybody. Unfortunately, not everybody that is on the show is going to want to talk to me today. Maybe down the road, but everybody wants to figure out how to get a job, and so that's what you're on there for, is to help them know what Recruit Military does for you. So
I live only to serve, sir, and it's a pleasure to be on your show.
Absolutely.
All right, folks, and now that you know who we are, we'd like to know who you are. Hit us up in that chat window. Let us know who you're with, who you're serving with, what your status is: retired, transitioning, active guard reserve, mil-spouse, caretaker. Where are you watching us from? We'd like to hear your questions as well. So if you've got questions, comments, pithy remarks, feel free to jump into the chat. And time allowing, we'll address each and every one. All right, Todd, let's light this candle. Financial planning. Let's face it, we could all use a little extra money. We could all afford to make a little extra money, and more importantly, to keep the money that we make. So this is a hot topic. Then there's lots of people handing out advice. All right.
Yep.
In the transition services, there's always financial advisors. They tell you pay down your debts, maintain 3 to 6 months household expenses and cash reserve, create a budget. In our conversations, you've kind of broken down a little more simply, which I appreciate because I'm not that bright, about 3 key budget considerations, 3 things to think about as you begin to make your financial plan post-military. Can you go over those?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question, because financial literacy is such a huge topic that is just brushed up on in TAP classes. And, I've got a great friend of mine that he started working for a big company, won't say who, but they have a lot of warehouses, a lot of deliveries. And he said, I quickly found out I took it for the job, or I took it for the paycheck, because that's what I felt like I needed to do. But the 8 to 10 miles of walking on the concrete warehouse floors every day, he said, I just couldn't do it. And so financial literacy is the very foundation that we need to think about, because if you can put yourself in a position where you don't have to take the paycheck and understand what all that means, it puts you in a much better place. So one of the things my dad used to say is, I like the KISS principle: keep it simple, Sally, Steve, and in his case, he would say, keep it simple, stupid. And I was okay with that, because there is something about keeping it simple. Finances don't have to be rocket science. And the first thing is, how much money is necessary? That's your budget. You've got to, and I know you do that in TAP, but you have to dig deeper than just, here's what I'm bringing in, here's what I think my expenses are. How much is necessary? Then the next question is, how much do I want? In other words, what planning and what investments and what do I need to do to get to the place where in 10 years I've got clients that are 50 and at 55 because they've got a 20 plus year pension, VA, they want to be done. They just want to simply be done. So you got to know, where do I want to get to? How much do I want? And then what is my plan? How do I get from here to there? A lot of times what that includes is, just like we're talking about for Transition 30 or this show, find a mentor, find an SME, find somebody that has been there, has done that. Don't just take your battle buddies, word for it, because a lot of military go into my field, which is perfectly fine, but then they work for a company that wants them to push a certain product. And I just had a client call me. He said, Todd, he said, the reason I didn't want to go with anybody else but you is my guy called me that I had served in, but he wanted me to buy a $2 million whole life policy. I mean, it was going to be thousands of dollars every month. And he said, I don't need it. I couldn't afford it, but that's what he offered me. So find somebody that you can trust, find a mentor, find an SME in all these different areas. And that'll help you to start to navigate the financial process.
And I compare that to a recent experience that I had at the dentist, strangely enough, right? I took my daughter to 3 different dentists, and all 3 of them said she needed braces.
Yeah.
It probably had nothing to do with the $14,000 price tag that was probably going to help them pay for the Mercedes in the parking lot. But they all seemed to come to the same conclusion, that I needed to pay them a large sum of money. So I always am cautious, be careful who you take advice from, especially if they're trying to make money off you.
That's it.
All right. Well, speaking of insurance policies, let's attack that one. We get the SGLI when we're in the service. Most of us don't think about it. Of course, when you're 18 or 24, you think you're going to live forever. You're bulletproof. What are you worried about? Life insurance. They shove a piece of paper in front of you and they say, okay, hero, check next to the amount that you want.
Yep.
Most of us just max it out because we don't want our spouse to be mad at us, but we don't really think about it. Now, when it comes to transition and that coverage goes away, now we have to seriously think about it. How much we need, where's it going to come from? Can you break this down for us?
Yep, absolutely. Well, first thing is VGLI is there for a reason, right? With what you're doing in the military, there are things that can happen that are not your fault, but make you uninsurable. And that's one of the things that you need to understand. VGLI is not there to just somehow benefit the government. It is there for a very valid particular reason. And it has gone up to $500,000. It used to be $400,000 minimum. Now it's $500,000. But here's the thing, a couple of things you need to consider on the SGLI, VGLI conversation. First of all, is that it's a real two-edged sword, because the other thing that you're doing in this transition process is you're going to the VA. You're getting all your evals up to date, your all your record keeping, all of that. You might be in your BDD process, whatever the case is. The thing that you need to understand is that BDD process is going to help you on your VA, but it could disqualify you for getting private life insurance. Okay. Because now all of those things that weren't documented or weren't in your record now are in your record. And the private life insurance company is going to look at that and say, we can't insure you. So make sure that you know that have your life insurance locked in with whoever you're going to go with before you start all your VA evals, and you'll be in a good place. The second thing is that a lot of people look at it and they say, well, VGLI, it's really cheap. And so what I did is I pulled some numbers, Lucas, and if you just go to va.gov, you can find some of this information. So for a service member that's getting out 30 to 34, they can get VGLI for $45 a month. That's $50,000 or $500,000 a month. That's not terrible. In a lot of places, that's pretty good. But once you go to 50 to 54, okay, you're $165 a month. And when you go to 60 to 64, it's $495 a month for that same $500,000. So it goes up very quickly. And one thing you need to realize, the max is $500,000, but with what we do, the rule of thumb is that you want to take 12 to 16 times your normal income, so that if something happens to you, your family has not set for life, but you're set for several years. And normally that's about, so if you're making 50,000 a year, 12 to 16 times, about $600 to $800,000 is kind of the benchmark that you want to look at for insurance. So a lot of times VGLI doesn't get you to the place where you're fully protecting your family. So,
and correct me if I'm wrong, generally speaking, the need for coverage kind of operates on a bell curve.
Yep.
Yeah, more at the center of your life when there are people that rely on you. Later, as you get older and you become an empty nester, your kids are out of the house, and it's now just a matter of settling final
Yep.
expenses.
And typically that's the case if you get into a little bit more wealthy situations. Life insurance can become a tax strategy and some of that. But for most you and me, that's exactly the case that we find ourselves in. So.
Okay, awesome. Now, one of the other things that service members have to take a look at as they approach that end of service date is survivor benefit plan. And I know nobody told me anything about survivor benefit plan, often referred to the SBP. I didn't know anything about it until somebody shoved that piece of paper in my face and said, check here or here. And if you check here, your spouse has got to tell us that they understand that you've opted out. Can you just kind of talk for a minute about what it is and why it's important?
Yeah, and this is a controversial subject for some reason, and it shouldn't be. I know a lot of folks that work for the government, they consider SBP to be mandatory, and I get it, but it really does boil down to it's based off of your personal situation, and let's break that down a little bit. So typically, you have to. You're correct. If you want out of SBP, you have to opt out, and if you have a spouse that would depend on that, they have to sign and opt out of it as well. And one of the things to realize is check with your VSO on this, because as recently as December of last year, with the National Defense Authorization Act, some of those requirements, it used to be that once you were opted in, you couldn't opt out. And once you were opted out, you couldn't opt in. That new act has changed some of the availability. So you really want to pay attention to this part of the conversation, even if you've already opted out or even if you've stayed opted in. Check with them, see what your particular situation would allow, because that's a big change. It used to be that you had a window from 24 to 36 months to make a change. Now that has certainly changed them a little bit. But let's use a specific example, Lucas. Let's go, and I just took some of these numbers off of militarypay.defense.gov. And let's just say that you've got an E9 and that their pension after 20 plus years is about 46,000, a little bit and change. Okay. So SBP is going to take 6.5% of that. And what you need to realize is that's your first year premium. And as you get cost of living adjustments, COLA adjustments with your pension, your SBP also gets adjusted. So it's going to go up. But if we just think about a 38-year-old, he put his 20 in, went in at 18, now he's 38. He's an E9, and what you have to for SBP, you have to be in for 30 years in order for that to kick in. So, but once you pay those 30 years, your premiums are done. But for 30 years at that $29.97 a year, assuming it doesn't go up, that's still close to $90,000. So when they put that box in front of you, says check here, literally you're making a $90,000 decision at least. And so what you want to think about is that you want to factor in your health. What's your health history? What's your medical history? What's your spouse's medical history? Because you can pay 29 years in the SBP, and if your spouse dies at 29 years, you could very well have paid all of that, and you don't get any benefit because now you outlive your spouse, and that SPP is went for nothing. But if you are not well or you die tomorrow and you've only paid in, $500 of that or whatever, that looks like a really good deal. So it's something that you just really have to individualize down to yourself and make that decision, and have the conversation with your spouse, especially about how do you feel. Some folks, the spouses were like, listen, I did 20 plus years with you in the Army, or the Army and you, however they want to look at it. I will have that SBP because I have to have that peace of mind. And that's a personal decision that you have to make. So.
And what's that SBP paying out? I mean, I crossed the street tomorrow. I got run over by a 5-ton truck. What is my spouse going to get? Is she getting the whole knot or a piece of it?
Great question, because you're only getting 55% of that pension. So again, it does, a part of the decision has to be the financial part of it. It just has to be. Here's what I would pay if I'm going to, have an annuity or a life insurance policy instead of the SBP. Here's what we will use. And any financial professional should be able to walk you through some of those numbers. But then there's also that emotional and psychological and all of those things that go into it that you have to weigh in as well.
Okay. All right. Great. So we talked about SBP. Let's talk about BAH. I remember having a conversation with my brother. My brother, who was he was in the service. He got out many years ago, before I did, and he was about to leave the military from Fort Campbell, and he was about to relocate to the civilian housing market, and he was very frustrated. He said, "I don't understand the housing prices are so high." And one of the things I said to him is, I said, I don't know a lot of 22-year-olds with a 2,000 square foot split level 4-bedroom ranch and attached garage. You may want to adjust your expectations. All right. So as we look at BAS and BAH, what should our transitioning service members consider?
You know what? That is such a huge consideration, Lucas, because the fact of the matter is that when most people are putting together how much do I need, they completely forget that BAS, BAH, it all goes away. And so when you're factoring that in, something as simple as how much should I, when you're in your out processing, they'll have another checkbox. How much do you want withheld on, say, your pension? And something as simple as that can be a multi-$1,000 decision in a time when, especially like VA payments, they're running 3 to 6 months behind to initially get started up, and a lot of my clients are saying that, so you might be in the middle of the place where you really need that money, but then all of a sudden you get hit with like a tax bill, for instance, because you didn't realize, okay, it's going to be a lot more expensive because of BAS and BAH going away. But also, like for instance, if we take that same E9, so you're making $46,000 in pension, and depending on the state that you live, that can be taxed. And then it is nothing for especially folks coming out of cyber or IT in the military to be making 80 or 90 on a pension, and then 200, 250 in their regular job. That's not unusual to have that happen. And if you have checked on your out processing form, I only want to have 10% withheld for taxes, automatically that $46,000 pension puts you in the 22% tax bracket, or the 12% tax bracket. And then you add in your spouse and your position. Once you're over 89,000 and change, you're in the 22% tax bracket. And for those months that you went, you haven't been withholding that, and literally you get several $1,000 surprise at the end that all you had to do is say, you know what, I'm probably going to be making this, so I need to withhold at least 22% out of my pension or whatever. And that will really help that whole transition from BAS, BAH, all of those things. Just really walk through that. And sometimes it takes somebody like me, who I've never been a veteran, so I don't include in some of those things, to really say, well, wait a minute, you're not going to have these things typically in the civilian sector.
And BAS and BAH are non-taxed, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so your tax burden's changing. Instead of having this whole section of your paycheck which is tax-free, all of a sudden you're paying tax on the whole kit and caboodle.
Yep. Yep.
All right. So don't do what I did and get out of the military and not withhold anything from your pension, because I'll tell you, I damn near had a cardiac event right there in the tax preparer's office.
Imagine.
I thought I was going to code out right there at the desk when they gave me a number, and I was like, that's great, I could use that money. She goes, no, that's what you owe. Where's my nitro? I thought I was going to lose it. Yeah, that's a tough one, but
Yep.
You got to look at that. Yeah, you got to understand your taxes, because they're not going away. All right, now into some real meat and potatoes, the money you can make, the money you can take home, the money you can put in your pocket. A lot of folks, as they leave the military, they take a look at their pay chart, they see what they're making, they immediately think to themselves, that's what I need to make, and they get fixated on salary, what's in my paycheck. But they miss out on something else, and one of the things that you reminded me of is that salary is just one slice, one little piece of the total compensation pie. Yeah. Can you explain for us, what do we mean by total compensation, and what are some considerations?
Yeah. And actually, Lucas, you're the one that was a catalyst for getting me started on this. In a previous show, you asked me an out of the blue question, which was a great question. But even simple things, like for me, this seems like a simple thing, but what does vesting mean? And that is a huge part of the consideration, because in the military, you're just looking at, okay, here's my salary, here's my BAS, BAH, all of those things. But when it comes to a civilian sector job, you're often, not always, but often, your salary is just a portion of the overall compensation package. And if you don't understand that, like for instance, I'm going to use a real life example of a client. Of course, I won't name names, but he came out and he was working for a company that has a great 401k. And here's a couple of things to know. A 401k is similar to your TSP. There are differences, but it is similar. And the thing that you need to know is that on a 401k, not every company is required to give you money, which would be called a match typically.
Yes.
So not everyone is required to do that. So don't think, oh, well, I'm going to sue them, or they're not doing me right, or whatever. It's just not required that they do a match. It's not even required that they offer a plan. So if they offer a plan, it's a huge benefit. Number one. Number two.
So let me just for the audience. Just to clarify that dollar match, right? So let's say the 401k is 6% of your base, right? Your base pay, and you say make $100,000. The match you're talking about.
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong. So if I put in 6%, so I put in 6,000, which is 6% of 100,000, and then if my company dollar match is 1-for-1, they contribute 6,000. At the end of the year, my 401k should have 12 grand in it. Am I right?
It should. Yes, absolutely. But then they also get into, well, we're going to match it dollar for dollar up to a cap. So it could be up to $3,000 or whatever the case may be. So again, very, very important that you understand what all that looks like. And the other thing is, remember that anything that you contribute out of your paycheck cannot be withheld when you leave that employer. It can't be. It's not legally allowed to be withheld, because it's your money. Absolutely. However, what people don't realize is that match money, or say profit sharing, that we had a great year, so we're going to give some of that, but they might put a vesting schedule on there. So my client, it was a 4-year vesting schedule. And what that means is that anything that the company contributed to that, if he quit after the actually in 401k, it was a 3-year vesting schedule. If he quit before that 3 years was up, a portion of what the company said, hey, here's $10,000, we're going to give that to you. They would say, okay, because you quit a year in, you only qualify for 2,000 of that 10,000. Don't mistake that. That's not illegal. That's perfectly within their right. And it is something that happens all the time. So for instance, again, on my client, he then also was offered, and we'll just use $100,000 in stock. A lot of
stock options,
stock. These are called restricted stock units, RSUs. again, all of these things are going to be thrown at you, and if you don't understand what you're getting into, it can be complex. But they had a 5% vesting schedule for the first year, 15% for 2 years, 40% third, 40% fourth.
Does it mean like, is that only a certain amount that they could liquidate, they could sell?
What that meant is, so let's say $100,000. He ended up quitting after the first year because again, that 8 to 10 miles on pavement, it just things he didn't factor in. He was able to, in that scenario, he was able to take 5,000 and liquidate it. The other 95,000, literally, he walked away from. That's one of those things. Now, again, there's individual scenarios for everything. And so I understand that. And that's a little bit more simplified, but that's what vesting means, is they can say, I'm going to give you 1,000 shares of stock vested over 4 years. For him, that was the schedule. So if you quit after that first year, you may only get 50 of those shares of stock. And so it's very important, because if you're saying, oh, I'm going to make $100,000 over at this company, but then the other company is paying you a higher, but doesn't have the same match or whatever, it's all part of that.
Yeah, and I think there are other pieces too. I mean, can we talk about some of the other possible forms of compensation? Relocation. What am I missing here? Gym memberships.
So here's the other thing. So with the 2017 tax and job cut, known as the Trump tax cuts, the other thing about military that you have to realize is they may offer you a relocation expense, say $10,000 in the military. That's not taxed. Now that has been removed. They will count that as $10,000 in your income, and you think, man, that's great. They're paying for me to move, except you'll get taxed on it the next year. That's part of your income at 12% or 22% or whatever the case may be.
I was talking to a retired general officer, and he was telling me, he said, one of the biggest mistakes that some transitioning service members make is they leave money on the table. And I said, how do you mean? And mind you, this is a retired one-star general Air Force. I won't mention his name, but he said, I was offered a $10,000 relocation assistance bonus when I hired on for a company. You know what I told him? No, I'm good. The Air Force is going to move me. And so he turned it down. And I'm sure that they just happily put that money back into their operating accounts.
Right.
And it was a cash bonus, not a reimbursement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he said a month later, when he realized what he did, he just kicked himself. He's like, I just said no thank you to $10,000.
Right.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, you've got reimbursable fee costs, and then you've got cash, right? Cash is just boom, move to New York. We want to hire you. Here's $10,000. The other one is what? It's like, give us your expenses and we'll reimburse you your costs. Is that about right?
So and that's the thing that has changed is cash reimbursement. Now, again, it could change again, but in 2017, any moving expenses for non-military, and with military, you're used to, you got PCS, you got orders. That is not taxable. Nobody else that I'm aware of in the civilian sector gets that ability anymore. Even if they offer you that $10,000 relocation bonus or just give you the cash, all of that counts towards your income. So, I mean, yes, he turned down $10,000, but he would have been taxed on it.
Yeah, he realistically only turned down like $7,500.
Right.
So, all right, so folks, so listen, when you get that $10,000 check from that big company who wants to hire you, do not go out and spend all $10,000 unless you want to have a heart attack down at your local tax preparer's office, like I almost did. Hey, we've got a great question here from Christopher Marquez. See if we can pull this over here. What's your thoughts on active duty TSP when you get out? In this market, would you consider moving it into a safer vehicle? Great question.
That is a great question. So one of the things that you need to realize is that the G fund, for instance, that is congressionally mandated to have certain returns. Now, historically, they have been low returns. But if you're the type of person that your risk is I don't want to ever see a red mark that shows that you've lost money.
Mhm.
There is no other vehicle that I know of in the civilian sector, in mutual funds and stocks and stock mutual funds that will guarantee you that you will never see a down year. So that's something to think about. Now, what I will say is that if you move it to your own IRA, for instance, and you utilize somebody like me, you can get some of the expert advice that the TSP, they're just not, that's not what they're there to offer. They're not there to offer you investment advice. So because it's in TSP, most folks are not going to be able to give you what they call fiduciary advice or in your best interest advice because you're not my client. And so I'm prohibited from saying, hey, Lucas, you need to go out and this is what you need to do with your money.
Yeah.
If it's not something that I'm helping to manage. But that's
Yeah.
a great question.
I think the one that I'm in right now is age-based, and if you have any comments about this one, please share with the audience.
Yeah,
Where, at the beginning, I've got a portfolio diversified with a heavy weight towards higher risk, large cap stocks, and as I get older, the distribution within the fund shifts towards
automatic,
safer
Yep.
funds, and then I guess is supposed to be more or less bulletproof when I hit 65. Sound about right?
Well, except for the bulletproof.
Well, we can hope.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so those are the L funds in the TSP, and that can be a whole nother conversation. There's been a lot of changes in the TSP platform. There's a new investment window and some of those things, but the L fund is automatically, it adjusts every year that you get closer. So one of the downsides of the L fund is that it is a one size fits all. And for instance, I have a client that has a 2040 fund. They are heavily 35% in international stock because that's part of the overall allocation of that L 2040 fund. And the problem is international right now is not doing very well. And so, but because it's a one size fits all, you don't really have that choice to say, you know what, I'd prefer not to be in the international space right now. So that's the only thing that you want to look at on the L side. But you're exactly right. As it gets closer to your retirement date, the whole idea is that you're going to retire in 2040. And so it's going to become more and more conservative as you get closer to 2040.
And I tell you what, Todd, you're absolutely right. We could hold a whole nother conversation, but we're just getting stretched for time as we wind this down and head to the finish line. If you had an opportunity to give one piece of advice, just one piece of advice to a transitioning service member in 30 seconds or less on their financial planning, what might it be?
Yeah, just use the rate strategy. For me, what that means is review your goals, assess the tools you have to achieve your goals, tailor your solutions, and then execute your plan. Just rate it out. And most military are perfectly comfortable with that idea, especially on the execution. But that's where most are going to fail in the financial side of it, is they're not going to execute.
So Todd, I'm going to write that down. We love our acronyms in the military.
I know it.
More acronyms, the better. They don't even have to mean anything. Trust me. All right. Todd, if some of our folks in the audience want to hear more from you, tell them about how they get that free 30-minute consultation.
Yeah. Well, first of all, remember next Thursday, Lucas and I and about 10 other SMEs are going to be on the Transition 30 call. Look me up on LinkedIn, Todd Nelson. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee is where I'm at. Look me up. I've got all kinds of information on that Transition 30. That's number one. If you want to have a 30-minute call with me where we talk about your individual situation, just remember, I can't give you advice if you're not my client, but I can give you generalized advice like we're talking here. And reach out to me. My number is 615-302-2488. Todd.Nelson@edwardjones.com, or hook up with me on LinkedIn and just DM me and let me know you'd like to take advantage of that 30-minute call. We'll get it set up.
30 minutes well spent if it puts money back in your pocket or helps you save the money that you've earned. Todd, thank you very much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. And folks out there in the audience, if you haven't already done so, do yourself a solid and go to www.recruitmilitary.com RecruitMilitary.com, where you'll find over 400,000 job opportunities from more than 16,000 employers coast to coast, around the world and around the corner. Recruit Military is on a mission to help veterans, transitioning service members, and mil spouses find meaningful employment. And for those who enjoy our content, be sure to tune in on the 25th of October when Raul and Gabby will be hosting a subject matter expert to talk about the stress of transition. Stress it'll be probably a lot less if you listen to somebody like Todd and how you manage your finances. Until then, this has been Lucas Connolly from Recruit Military. Good luck and Godspeed.
Thanks, Lucas. Good luck.